So I've just started playing D&D with a group of friends, and I'm having a great time. Everyone but the DM has played before, as it's my friend's older brother who said he'd show us the ropes. Among the people playing is a guy in our group who I know has a crush on me and has had one for a while now. This has never been an issue for me, as I've made it clear to him I don't see him like that, and I'm just waiting for him to get over it. The problem is that in character, he constantly flirts with my character, like joking about sharing a bed since we're short on gold at the inn, making comments about my character's body. One time, when falling off something, he implied he could use my 30 seconds into the video, and I don't think that's how biology works. Oh, and another time, he just straight up outright asked to kiss me while we were drunk in a tavern. He's playing a bard, and I know that flirting with everyone is kind of supposed to be their thing, but it does feel especially targeted at me. Is it unreasonable for me to be getting uncomfortable with this? I've hinted out of game that I'd rather he stop doing this, but that hasn't changed anything. I do feel like if it was anyone else, it wouldn't bother me as much since they aren't into me. Would it be out of line for me to ask the DM to speak to him? I don't want to make things awkward, but I feel like it's affecting my enjoyment of the game. Has anyone else had to deal with something like this? First and foremost, flirting with everything does not need to be a bard's primary thing at all by any means. Second and foremost, whether or not it is a bard's primary thing doesn't matter. If it's making you uncomfortable, it needs to stop immediately. Apparently, she got the DM to speak to the player, and hopefully that helped to fix this situation. Remember guys, just because your thing doesn't seem bad in comparison to other people's things, doesn't mean it isn't bad. If it's making you uncomfortable, it needs to stop. So this story took place in the 40k RPG Dark Heresy, which isn't common on here, so I'm going to give a bit of context before getting into it. For anyone who knows what 40k and Dark Heresy are, skip down to the players. Warhammer 40k is way too much to describe here, but if I had to give a one-sentence rundown that gives you the knowledge to follow along, it would be grimdark, intergalactic, cyberpunk dystopia. It's not a great description, but it'll do. In Dark Heresy, you play as the Inquisition, or a religious secret police force. It's a D100 system where low rolls are better, and for every 10 you beat the DC, you get 1 degree of success. The more degrees you pass by, the better you did. One more piece of context, psychers are mages who get their power from hell. If not properly trained, their head will explode and they'll accidentally summon a demon. The players, Tech Priest Medic is me, Combat Specialist Bodyguard, Inquisitor Skill Monkey, and Astropath, the Psyker Support Mage. We all, including the GM, are very used to playing this system and playing with each other. This is our normal gaming group, and we've been together for years, and we still play together. Inquisitor and Astropath go for a walk around the station to check things out while I do a surgery. On their walk, the Astropath senses that someone just had their psychic awakening nearby, and they both rush to the scene. There, they find a bunch of people bagging and kidnapping a young boy, who's obviously a psyker. Astropath rolls to see if these are the people who are supposedly kidnapping young psychers, which you would know since he works for that organization. Rolls a D100 and he gets a 1 with something like 7 degrees of success. GM says, yep, they're the right dudes. Inquisitor walks up to them, flashes his badge, and attempts to elicit their assistance in future operations. The guys look at each other, look at the badge, drop the psyker, and pull out their guns. They were not the right dudes. A fight ensues between the 2 party members and 12 fake psyker police officers. Our guys' equipment and stats are vastly superior, but with half the party sitting on the sidelines, it was a slog, and the Astropath went into negative hit points. Some of the baddies flee to warn their organization, and the 2 characters alone can't stop them. The fight gets down to the last 2 enemies, so the player characters drop their weapons and attempt to incapacitate the last guys for some enhanced interrogation. As they pin the 2 enemies, one of the guys who had ran off turns around, comebacks, and starts shooting his allies. The enemy kills one of the prisoners before the Astropath makes his head explode, and the player characters drag their last prisoner back to the safe house. Back at the safe house, I'm finishing up the surgery when the prisoner gets dragged in. We start preparing to interrogate them until the GM says, oh, by the way, this guy's badly wounded and about to die. Mind you, this guy didn't take a single hit in the fight and should have been perfectly fine, but okay, whatever. I dust off my medical tools and get to work patching his wounds, passing my roll easily with 5 or 6 degrees of success. GM says, oh, your medical work sets off a bomb in his brain and his head explodes. I reply, what? First off, this guy shouldn't be injured at all. Second, even if he was, I'm healing gunshot wounds at most. I shouldn't be poking around anywhere near his brain, much less the bomb in there. Third, if the bomb was going to be set off by my medical attention, that probably should only have happened if I failed the roll. GM is adamant. The guy's head exploded, and we're left with no prisoners. Session ends there, and we all start listing our grievances. GM shouldn't have told Bodyguard and I that we have to do a major medical procedure before the plot kicks off, and then proceeds to kick off the plot, taking us out of the entire session. I at least got to do something. Poor Bodyguard hardly spoke a dozen words and didn't even make a single roll. Astropath could have easily known that the Psyker police guys were frauds. GM's excuse was, but they had uniforms. The combat should have been scaled down to reflect the fact that half the party wasn't there. Oh, and because of the previous 3 points, the escaped enemies now knew exactly who and what we were, and that we were after them. Our role as secret police was completely compromised, and our subtlety was reduced to 0. The GM very obviously went out of his way to contrive as many reasons as possible as to why we couldn't at least interrogate one of the fake police officers and figure out what is going on. The GM gets fed up with our complaints and says, if all you're going to do is complain, I'm not giving you any XP for this session, and leaves. We did not play another session. Look, I get it. This isn't as crazy as many other stories, but that's why I read it, because this is probably the exact kind of RPG horror story you're going to come across if you ever do, and I hope you don't. But if you do, it's probably going to be something like this. A GM who just clearly doesn't know what they're doing. A GM who's kind of railroady, who doesn't take player choice into account, and who doesn't structure their plot very well. Clearly, the GM thought that an ambush from these police officers would be cool, and having less party members there would mean it's more deadly. But there are a lot of buts there, like cutting out half the party isn't very fun for the half that isn't in the combat, and an ambush doesn't really work if your party rolls well in perception and you just have to kind of lie to them, and it'll just come off as contrived and annoying instead of interesting. At the end of the day, though, it's important to take criticism and learn from your mistakes, because as a GM myself, I've made plenty of mistakes just like this, but the difference here is that the GM just decided to take away their experience like a petulant child. And well, that's not good for anyone involved. I've been playing D&D for a decent while now, just 2 years, nothing too special, but during those 2 years, I've never felt so betrayed than in this game. For a few months, I was scrolling around a Discord LFP server and found this new game with the 5th edition system, since it's the only one I'm comfortable with. For the first session, I was a few minutes late, which I felt kind of ashamed of, since I always said in the Discord, I'll be on time. But to my surprise, the people in the voice chat seemed really nice and understandable, so we started the game. We all introduced our characters. We had a human sorcerer, human fighter, human paladin, and an elf. Was either a wood elf or a ladrin, I can't remember, but they were a bard. Also me as the half-elf drow variant rogue. I've always wanted to play rogue, but in every campaign I've played, there was always at least one other, and I felt like this was my chance to try it. When in-game our characters met, my character got a few odd looks from both NPCs and other player characters, especially that bard, which I fully expected since drow in general don't have a good name and my character in general just looks shifty. During our games, I was sort of an intelligence gatherer, feeding information to our party plus more. I never believed in lone wolf rogues, so I always told my party what I'm going to do, with what I hope to accomplish. I told my party everything, since I wanted to earn their trust both as a player and a reliable character. While in combat, some of the other players seemed to almost always mistake me for a full drow, saying, "Don't you have disadvantage on that? We're in sunlight." And me and the DM always had to remind them, I'm a half drow and I don't have sunlight sensitivity. Fast forward a few sessions, at this point, we are level 5, and we discover that the sorcerer has some draconic heritage, and some half-dragon is trying to kill him. This half-dragon managed to ambush us with some wolves while we were trying to sleep in our camp, but we left the bard on watch, and he spotted them and managed to warn us in time. When combat started, we were not doing so good. Bad rolls all around. The fighter even actually chipped his sword on his 3rd nat 1. With some quick thinking, I used the darkness spell, half drow, as a 5th level feature, and we used it to our advantage to run. But unfortunately, we had to leave most of our gear behind, at least the stuff that wasn't on our person. When we thought we had lost them, to my surprise, the paladin described himself grabbing me by the collar and trying to lift me up and saying, "What sort of magic was that, huh? You practicing dark magic?" I tried to reason with him by saying, like, look, apparently most drow can do that, and I apparently can too. Hey man, the last thing we need right now is to fight each other. Can you get a grip? After a long conversation, the rest of the party wanted to go to private voice chat, while I scouted ahead to search for any more danger or a nearby town or shelter. Doesn't take a genius to see where this one is going. In between sessions, I get messages from the DM, each making him sound a little bit worried about something. He asks stuff like, what's your alignment again? Oh, neutral good? Really? Or, hey man, what's your AC and hit points? Oh, okay. Fast forward again a few sessions, we were fighting the half-dragon again in a town square, or something, I can't remember. But at this point, we were prepared and a little bit stronger and had an NPC who was okay in combat. Long story short, we won! But during that fight, I went down taking too many hits from some archer. Meanwhile, the bard kept on casting healing word on either himself, the fighter, or paladin. I didn't want to be rude and ask for healing, so I just waited. By the time combat ended, I almost died. 2 fails and 3 saves on my death saves. Instead of trying to heal me, or popping a potion in my mouth, the party decided to interrogate the basically dead, but barely alive half-dragon. The sorcerer spoke, "Why were you trying to kill me? Who sent you?" But the half-dragon was basically drowning in his own blood, and the DM did his best to do an impression of his last, words? Or letters. They were like, he, and then he died. During this time, the DM had our NPC put one of those healing potions in my mouth, waking me up to see the party gathered around a corpse. The paladin says, "Dra? Is he talking about drow?" And the paladin points his sword at me, saying, "I knew I couldn't trust him." Me, being legitimately confused, said, "What?" The whole party had an argument about who sent this half-dragon, and it somehow pointed to me. I tried to defend myself, but the players just kept saying, "We cannot trust him. He always sneaks around and keeps secrets." What are you guys talking about? I've told you everything I know. You 100% did not tell us everything. That last line kind of made me frustrated, so I described to everyone how I take out my short swords and take out my daggers and threw them down to the ground and just walked up to the paladin and said, "If this doesn't earn your trust, you can..." Literally before I can finish, he rolls to attack. Well, crap, he missed, and combat started again. The other party members joined in, and I assumed they were going to try to stop the paladin. Nope, they were trying to stop me. I was up first, so I decided to pick up my short sword and disengage. I did the dodge action. Long story short, it was a 4v1, odds against me, and I was low on hit points. I managed to survive by just dancing around them with disengage, and I took dodge actions as my actions. I didn't want to kill another player character, even though they were trying to kill me. Luckily for me, my AC was definitely high, and I could block most attacks with the defensive duelist feat I took. But I knew I just couldn't survive any longer. After seeing all odds against me, the DM finally steps in. He says the NPC is joining initiative and describes how he goes into his bag and blows a loud horn, and steps in between me and the rest of the party, trying to reason with them and explain how I will never do such things. Now, a little backstory on our NPC here. Well, he was apparently a former captain of the guard, and the horn he blew was a call for reinforcements. I only knew this since I remember him telling us, and judging by the way the others didn't really care, they didn't remember. On my turn, the DM says, "You get inspiration." What? Wait, no, I don't give him inspiration. It's DM inspiration, not Bardic. He can reroll a dice if he wants to now. That's not a thing. You made that. The DM quotes the page numbers on both the DMG and Player's Handbook. Soon after, I got a message from the DM. I've had enough. Just kill them. I honestly didn't want to do it, but I attacked the paladin first, and he went down in one hit thanks to sneak attack, and since no one took time to heal themselves before this combat, and the bard used his last 2 spell slots on himself and the sorcerer, everyone was pretty low on hit points. Long story short, some of the other town guards came in too, demanding everyone put their weapons down. Fighter refused, and he died, and sorcerer and bard got arrested. DM says, "End the session. Can I talk to the 4 of you in another voice chat?" I was so confused. Next day, I saw that in the Discord, the 4 other players were not there. The DM messaged me explaining that the human players all knew each other and were playing chaotic/lawful neutral characters, and suspected that I was some sort of evil person, since in the fighter's backstory, he was literally stabbed in the back by another rogue. The sorcerer's parents were enslaved by drow, and the paladin, well, he hated any dark magic and vowed to destroy any and all of it. thinking I had some dark magic in me. For the past few sessions, they were plotting to kill me, and even convinced the bard to go with them on it. The DM tried to convince them not to do it, and they said they wouldn't, but just did it anyway. He also said the half-dragon's last words were supposed to be Dragon, which was the sorcerer's father, and didn't think anyone would misunderstand that as Drow. The DM then apologizes, saying he should have told me sooner, or did something sooner, and said he's gonna make things up by rebooting the campaign but with new people, which I am still playing today. Halfway through the story, I was wistfully thinking, hoping that we would have a repeat of that Mandalorian story where the one player kills everyone else because they weren't ready for the fight. And here, we actually saw that. It wasn't wistful thinking, it was just the truth. Good to see the DM actually helping out here. The Drow would have no doubt died if the DM hadn't given him an ally so he could proc sneak attack. Good thinking on the DM, and yes, you probably should have stopped this beforehand, but the players did promise not to do it and just surprised you and just did it anyway. And yes, you could use DM magic to just say no, and that's always the route I recommend taking and the route I would personally take, though at the same time, this is fun too. It's very satisfying to see this rogue just tear apart this party of morons. Beyond the lesson of don't fight a rogue who has sneak attack while you have like 10 hit points left, there is another lesson here. Party conflict can be fun. Here we see it created quite naturally by someone just happening to be an enemy of all these player characters, but if that's something you actually want to do, you should talk about it above table at least a little bit. Not everyone wants to play out a heated party conflict, and giving someone a fair warning saying, hey, our characters probably wouldn't get along based on their backstories could give them time to either prepare or work something out with you. I mean, at the very least, you probably shouldn't team up with all the other player characters to slaughter one dude. And at the very least, you should try not to lose that embarrassingly in your favor fight. Hello, this story is over now, and everyone is much happier since it ended, but I have been mulling it over for a while now, and felt like I needed to share it, so I came here. I have explicit permission from the people affected to post it as well. I'll name the guy Sky. Sky was playing a female bard named Elise, and was the closest thing to a rules lawyer we had. He actually helped a lot with encounters and homebrew for the DM. They're neurodivergent, and math gets fuzzy, but he'd also reject most ideas if they weren't rule compliant or if he just didn't like them, and would also straight up just metagame a lot. He had an optimized character, and while I'm not saying that's wrong, he did essentially choose what would break every possible encounter, social or battle-wise or otherwise, to the point where almost no one else could do anything about or during it. There were a lot of problems with Elise as a character and Sky as a person, but believe me that delving into them all would take forever. All you need to know was that Elise had main character syndrome and was always out of character. We actually thought she'd be a traitor. And Sky had the poor DM in an abusive chokehold as their oldest friend. It took until I arrived to start untangling the mess of abuse, manipulation, and isolation Sky was putting them through. Oh, and the rest of us through too. Sky would be passive-aggressive about things he hated the DM was doing, would try and push everyone to playing how he liked, favored girls, or non-binary folks he perceived as girls and refused to budge on that, in everything for a potential girlfriend, and hated not being the center of attention. Just like his PC, he wanted to be the one getting the praise, the lore, the magic items, the everything, and would insert himself into roleplay, lore, and literally anything without consulting either the players nor the damn DM. That last point, him wanting attention so bad he'd do anything for it, that's what caused this mess. DM is very permissive when it comes to character creation, backstories, and lore. Essentially, they just need some information to tie into the plot, some explanation on details, and they will handle most of it, sometimes asking you for details if you had something specific in mind. However, they give a bit of an opening too, by letting you roleplay a character related to your player character's backstory, if you want to do it, or letting you make a little bit of inconsequential lore about your character, whatever. Well, Sky apparently wanted it that way to the point of making the entire Feywild his own playground. Elise's character, his character's arc, boiled down to her wanting to find her missing brother. Great, except Sky refused to give the DM anything else to work with to tie her into the plot, or the party, or anything about her brother, and instead pressured the DM to finalize Elise's character arc quickly. And soon enough, once we found her brother, it became clear that Elise had nothing else going for her character or plot-wise anymore. So given that Elise came from the Feywild, he instead decided that pressuring the party to go to the Feywild as often as possible would be the best solution to keep her relevant instead of literally anything else. Seriously, he said, and I quote, that Elise's new arc was whatever her friends wanted to do. Anyway, because of the aforementioned point of DM letting him roleplay Elise's family and GuY not giving the DM anything else to work with, this essentially created a loophole where GuY would technically DM every time we went to the Feywild. Our first arrival to the Feywild is as a celebration of Elise's family reunion, so it made sense to go and all, but once we got there, GuY then started to describe the flora, the fauna, the architecture, the people, and every tradition and bit of culture. He would also roleplay with himself by having several of Elise's family members greet us and be with us for the majority of everything, talk amongst themselves, and direct entire scenes on their own. It got to the point where I actually had to message the DM and ask them if they had agreed to this much domineering from GuY, and they effectively told me no. This had come completely out of nowhere, and GuY was essentially stealing the DM role from them. I didn't mind being the disruptor, so I messaged GuY and told him to chill out and give the DM back the DM role, to which he relented, and we left the Feywild, and I thought this would be over, but boy oh boy did it happen again and again. GuY made sure that we had to come back a few in-game days later by proclaiming that it was now Elise's mother's birthday, and that she would not accept her daughter missing it for nothing, even though we'd explained it to the woman that we were technically trying to prevent the world from ending, and that we didn't have much time. I have to clarify that GuY is actually manipulating the fact that our characters, being in character, would actually let her have this, but the rest of us out of character were annoyed as hell. Smartly at least, the DM tries to not make it a total waste of time, tying it into the plot by making it so the character we've been searching for was from the Feywild, so we could ask around if anyone knew him. And yet once again, once we get there, GuY takes over again by having his character talk the most, stealing the scene, describing how wacky and fun they are, making crap up until we arrive to the people there having an apparent death penalty for people leaving the Feywild. Literally everyone was in shock because nothing else before had pointed to this being a thing, so I bite the bullet and message the DM and ask if they'd even agreed to this, and lo and behold, this was as new to them as it was to us. Everyone kind of tries to play this off in character, but this was such a huge breach of control and trust that didn't take long before GuY got confronted on his behavior directly. I mean, I would be confronting him the moment he starts trying to take away my precious flower describing. That's my job, you sniveling fuck! GuY eventually got kicked from the campaign after the abuse system he had going to keep himself untouchable fell through, and once he slighted both myself and the DM and tried to play us both by thinking we wouldn't be communicating through his rather terrible manipulation, like I said, there was a lot of things that contributed to him being booted, such as him trying to retcon things after he realized his character made mistakes, him ruining encounters for everyone, or him trying to run his own campaign when he realized that everyone loved DMs. But these two were the first strikes, and what destabilized his reign of terror and allowed us to free ourselves of him. That's pretty much it. Sorry about this being so long. There's just a lot that he did in the last 2 years I knew him that kind of gets hard to differentiate how bad things were. So yeah, I had to re-edit this several times. I hope I got the main points across though, and thanks for letting me vent a little. Venting is healthy. It's good for you to get these feelings out there, especially after somebody is that crappy. Look, the in-game stuff is ridiculous. Trying to steal the position from your DM is never a good thing. And while I think it's really cool to allow players to roleplay some of their family members, it could be really cool for letting people vary up their roleplay styles if they're getting tired of playing the same character over and over and over again. However, here we see where it can go wrong. We see where the metagaming can kind of blend with the roleplay and make it into somebody who's trying to steal the DM's chair, which, yeah, that sucks. It's not just the whole shared roleplay thing, it's also characters just declaring facts about your world. This has actually happened to me. I had a player in my campaign who would kind of just say lore facts without, you know, asking me, the person who created the homebrew world. Now, in that case, I told him to knock it off because it was creating some glaring contradictions. But in this case, telling him to knock it off is a little bit more complicated because we see here an out-of-game abuse system, a perfect way to describe a super toxic and manipulative individual's propensity intensity, for systemizing their control over you. Holy hell, that was a lot of words. Sorry about that. Look, the reason I have so many words to describe it is because I've been through it too. It absolutely sucks when you have somebody that manipulative. But the first step is to expose manipulation for what it is. Don't just tell yourself it's manipulation. Tell other people. Explain your situation to other people and get their input. Because most likely, they'll help to guide you through what's going on. If Lord of the Rings taught me one thing, you don't gotta do it alone. You never have to do it alone. Throwaway account because my friends lurk here. I was in a D&D campaign for about a year now. My friend was a homebrewed kobold barbarian. During the start of the campaign, I convinced her to allow my kobold to essentially shift into a dragonborn when he raged via magical tattoos. This was due to him being from a tribe of kobolds who favored strength and chose their champions via gladiatorial combat. The purpose of the champion was to serve as a display of strength and power to the rival tribes. Though being slightly airheaded, he was very much into blood sports and honored combat, with severe case of small man syndrome, so he would rage often when being teased excessively about his height. This is important to the story. I'd say the moment red flags started popping up was when, after one interaction, several months in, with a traveling merchant NPC, when bartering for a magic weapon she had on sale, she made a snarky comment about him being too small for it, and for the sake of fun and context, I popped rage and aimed to intimidate her. I'm not sure if I failed or succeeded that role, but she made a counter offer to sleep with my character in exchange for a discount. Obviously, I had nothing to lose, so I accepted, and after that, it went downhill from there. The amount of female NPCs trying to get under my barbarian skin was never ending. Of course, there was the intentional flirty ones who were in my character's face about it, but then there were some who played it passive-aggressively, to the point where most of my interactions with female characters turned into a teasing session, which I was sort of thrown off by. I grew tired of it and started outright rejecting advances, and this is where it gets worse. One day, my kobold suddenly loses the ability to transform for just seemingly no reason. So I thought it was a special arc made for my character. I have him return to his tribe and talk with the shaman to find out why he's lost his power and get some guidance on getting my power back. DM tells me the marks of the champion are a symbol of conquest and is fueled by spilling blood or claiming others. Which from this point on essentially meant in order to have my kobold undergo a transformation, when they raged, I either needed to religiously A, outright murder someone, or B, bone someone with the intent to make them pregnant. Move aside, skill trees. Vamoose, milestone leveling. Sayonara, experience. Sex is the real level up. Needless to say, I was confused at first. But when I asked the people at the table in private, the solutions were murdering some bandits or going to a brothel. Since no one made a fuss, I just kind of kept my mouth shut about it. But at this point, I started losing touch with my character. But the icing on the cake was when we captured a sorceress, lackey of the BBEG, and I went to interrogate them in the cells. And instead of being intimidating, she ended up casting charm on my barbarian. He failed, and the DM had me roll another will save to resist their attempt at seducing me. He failed again, and in a lustful rage, they apparently ended up doing it through the bars, and I got no further information. After that instance, I just checked out. I dodged a few sessions without telling anyone before, just letting them know I quit entirely. Well, that is certainly something. I don't know what the DM's goals were here. Maybe she was just some kind of troll, and there you go. But if this is trolling, well, it sucks. I mean, it's still terrible. This is obviously not great behavior, and a wonderful way to ruin a really cool character concept. I might steal the idea of kobolds turning into dragonborn using magical tattoos in the future. It's just a neat idea, but instead of taking the idea and using it to create a cool story this player would be invested in, this DM instead took it as a great way to create a weird porn film in their D&D game, which might be your speed, that might be fun, but you need to have players that actually want that. And when you take control of a player character and force them into a plot they don't belong in, or that the player doesn't want to be in, well, you get this as the result. Alright, and that's going to be it for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips series, where I give advice to both DMs and players, old and new, and while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment stolen DM to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Next, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.